thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. It looks like most of you were here at our last committee meeting, but for those of you who weren't, we're going to go through some of the things that we went through last week just to catch you up. To start off, one of the things we talked about, not last week, at our last meeting, one of the things we talked about was that the school district, the administration, the board are very focused on getting us through this pandemic. It's obviously the priority right now, making sure we keep kids and teachers healthy, making sure we keep the schools open and the kids in the schools as much as possible. That's the top priority. What we can't lose sight of is that we have challenges tomorrow that we have to think about that are coming down the pipeline that we have to address. What we're seeing with, and we've got some of our experts here today, what we're seeing in the world of school construction is that these prices are going up with inflation, with supply chain issues, 5, 8, 10% every year. And so the longer we wait, the more expensive this will be, and that really hurts the district's ability to remain fiscally responsible. And so we have to talk about these challenges that are coming up. At the same time, of course, we know there are challenges today. And so one of the things I wanted to make clear is that we know that there's a lot going on right now with masks. Everyone feels really passionate one side or the other about masks in schools and what do we do about the kids. The district understands this is a major thing that we need to talk about as a district to come up with a plan. So there's a meeting on Saturday to really go into that. If you're passionate about that issue, we really encourage you to come out and have your voice heard. Here today, we're going to talk about different topics. So I'll keep us on track on that. Hope you understand. We really do want to hear your thoughts on that masking topic. And we have a whole meeting specifically for that on Saturday. So please come out to that if you want to talk about that issue. Today we're going to talk about the schools, our infrastructure, and what our plan looks like. Our superintendent, Dr. Tambry, is going to lay the groundwork for kind of why we're here, what led us to this point, and then we're going to go into our engagement process.
Thank you, Colin. For those of you who I have not, my voice is too loud for this microphone. So we're going to hope it doesn't have feedback, but otherwise I might just talk without it. Okay, thanks. We are going to just review a couple slides from the other night, and yeah, I gotta be on this side. I was hoping that I want to be able to look at you. Stand here and work the areas. We are just to remind you, the board has a strategic plan that drives all of our work, and you are really here to help us formulate a plan that's created by the community. Not only you sitting here, but the phone survey, the internet survey, and information throughout. And so it's really critical that you are here and participating with us, so we appreciate that. You can see right with the 5 goals that the board has adopted, you're hitting 2 of these right off the bat. I would argue that you're hitting all 5 of them because they impact the other 3. So as we discussed last time, District 89 is a special place. You live here for a reason. We have a long-standing tradition of excellence where we empower all of our learners. And I'm excited to say that that's not just my feeling, but it's backed with data. We are the top performing school that feeds Lombard 87. We are in the top 15% nationally, according to our MAP scores, and several of our buildings, according to the Illinois Assessment for Readiness, are in the top 10% of the state. So not only are we top performing, but as a taxpayer, I would want to know that we're spending money fiscally responsibly. And so the return on your investment, when you give us your tax bills, or your tax money to pay the tax bills, you're getting a huge return on that investment. District 89 spends the lowest amount per student on operating in the 6 Lombard feeders, and we are the highest performing of those 6 feeders. So again, it's not just like a gut feeling when I tell you this is a special place where your kids are going to excel. We have evidence and data to support that. So obviously, there's a lot of focus on social and emotional learning and academics to support your students and ensure our staff have the necessary resources that they have. that this conversation really centers around ensuring that our buildings are healthy and maintained. All of our schools are over 50 years old, and we want them to be around for another 50 years. And so that's really the conversation that we're having here and with the community right now. That's why you're here. You have an interest in facilities or an interest in maintaining and preserving the assets that District 89 owns, and you know that maintaining our aging facilities provides a critical resource to our staff and students. District 89 continues to be fiscally responsible and has maintained these buildings to the best of their ability, actually better with Tim, where's Tim? Up front. Tim and Ron and his team, they really have done a nice job of maintaining what they can. We're at a point where there's bigger projects and that need to be addressed. And so we talk right now about the bonds. We have two sets of bonds, one actually one now, one already fell off. As we talked about last time, a bond is paid off in a finite period of time. It's not added to the tax rate in perpetuity, and bonds can only be used for brick and mortar, only brick and mortar. It cannot be used for operational, teacher salary, paper supplies, anything operational. As we discussed, again, the District 89 board, looking back years and years and years, have been pretty fiscally conservative and have always looked at ways to provide tax relief to the community members, in addition to being fiscally responsible with the tax dollars that they have. The district, working with PMA, Tammy up front is from PMA, worked to refinance our sets of bonds in 2015 and 2018 that resulted in about $750,000 in savings to the taxpayers. And we have most recently, this in 2020, paid off our 2018 referendum bonds. What that means for all of you who live in District 89, when you get your tax bill this spring, you are going to actualize a tax savings. The average home in District 89 is about $410,000. So you know what your house costs. So you have to kind of gauge what your savings will be based on what your house costs. But it's about a $239 savings that everybody that lives in the community that owns property and gets their property tax bill will actualize in April when the tax bills go out. So what we're here to talk about is really, Colin and his team are gonna review the data that we received from you all, the telephone survey, the internet surveys from our community engagement meetings, and really hear from you on what these three levels, what this next process is gonna be. So we've narrowed it now to 3 levels of funding and what more specific projects would be done in those 3 levels. Last time it was a little more global. You rated what your priorities were. Was it safety? Was it, renovations? So we base all of our decisions tonight on that feedback that we've received over the last month. And so we want you to continue that conversation. We want you to participate tonight and give us your feedback as we go through what this next phase is. So tonight you're going to hear a lot more detail about about what each specific funding level covers and remind you what that tax break is. Before I turn it over to Colin, just a reminder for everyone that the board and Legan, our architect who's in the back, Paul, we've been working on this for quite some time. And the initial list of projects started well over $100 million and had some maybe flashier projects. Things we maybe didn't absolutely need, but maybe would have wanted, like additions, that type of thing. The board said thank you, but no thank you. Please reduce this list to maintain our buildings. We are not looking for fancy additions at this point, or we want to maintain what we have and continue to provide a high-quality learning experience for our students. And so Paul and Rob and Tim worked to narrow it down to the needs. And that list was about $60 million. And the board said, okay, we don't want to raise taxes. So now, in order to stay under this next set of bonds, your limit to spend is about $27-ish million. And so everything you see tonight is going to fall under that $27 million mark. When Colin gets to the projects, you'll see some percentages next to them to say what percentage of the list is actually being covered. That's off the $60 million list. But recall, the board was very committed to not even propose an option that resulted in a tax increase, okay? Just wanted to remind you of that and give that context before I turn it over. And I am done for the night, so.
There we go. And by the way, I think she's half done just because that's the portion that Dr. Cameron was presenting, but also because when you're trying to speak with feedback, that is like the hardest thing to do as a speaker. So I commend you on dealing with that. All right, so there's a few things I wanted to cover, like the groundwork. Dr. Timmer said much of this already, but it's important, so I want to be sure we really emphasize it, so we know what we're about to look at and what got us here and what we're talking about. Number one, I want to give context. We have worked, my company, E.O. Sullivan, we have worked with dozens of school districts, community colleges, units of government. I got to tell you something we never see. When bonds come up, we never see a unit of government say, oh, let's give some of that back to the taxpayers. They're always like, ooh, free money. We can just take exactly what that is, no one will ever know, and we get to go use that money for whatever we want. So the fact that the district let the first set of bonds expire and is giving all of that to the taxpayers, and now we're talking about that second set of bonds, on how much of that do we renew, and we're going to you as the community to guide that discussion. We don't see that often. So I wanted to commend the district on their fiscal responsibility with that, and also remind you again, that $200+ in tax savings is locked in. What we're talking about for today is how much more would you like to see as residents compared to how much you'd like to see invested into the schools. So that's the groundwork. Second thing that's so important is what Dr. Temmerer just said, which is the full list of projects that could be done is right around that $60 million mark. And so what we're talking about is two things. We're looking for your guidance on two things. How much do we invest? So how much of that are we going to be able to tackle here right now? Again, as Dr. Temmerer said, about the max we can do is about 27. So we're not even going to get to half, but it's still good progress. It's great progress. And so how much do we spend? And then number two, where do we prioritize that spending? That's the feedback you all gave us at our last meeting. So between you, the phone survey, the community, we got about 500 data points back from the community that said, this is where we'd like to see that money prioritized. You guys gave us a lot of really good feedback, and what you're going to see as we go through the next few slides is just how much your feedback drove this process to lead into three final options that we're going to go through. So I want to walk you through kind of how phase two, which is the phase we just concluded, how that went, and what that means for phase three, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So as a review of how we gather data, there's three ways that we gather information. We gather it from the community through a phone survey. Some of you may or may not have gotten that survey. If you did, thanks for taking it. We'll be doing another one shortly, so if you get that phone call, please make sure to jump on and take that survey. We gather through community committee meetings, like today, and we gather through public engagement sessions. You guys are 1/3 of that process, and what you'll see is you're a very important part of that process, because one of the things that we see in the data is that the more engaged people get, the more their opinions tend to change a bit. Not on everything, but on some things. And so you guys are our most engaged people. You're a very important part of the data that we look at, because you're at one end. You're more engaged. Officially, it's called you're more educated or more informed. If you want to walk around and tell people that you're educated and informed, feel free to have fun with that. But from a data perspective, that's the important part that you all play. So as we look at this data, you're going to hear me talk about it. As people become more engaged, their opinions change to blank. That's you all. You all told us what your opinions were, and we saw how that was different in some cases from a community set with their intuitive reactions to the photos. So what we're going to do is we're going to look through how we got here, then we're going to talk about the three options, and then we're going to have you, just like last time, we'll pass out sheets. It'll be a little easier now because there's just three things to get feedback on. but we'll pass those out and have you give us feedback at the end of the meeting. So that's how the rest of today is going to go. Let's talk about how we got here. Again, we had our finance committee meeting January 11th. We held a number of public forums. We provided opportunities for the public to give feedback both in person and virtually. We had the phone survey, we had online and in-person responses. We gave the public as many chances as possible to give feedback, and the public was very engaged. It was exciting to see that. What we saw is that all the individual projects that we tested were supported. You remember we kind of captured everything in 10 different categories? It's not unsurprising that all of them were supported. There weren't any overly controversial things in there, and as Dr. Tamler said, they were a list of needs, not wants. And so, of course, all of them were supported. What we wanted to see from there is how were they ranked. Remember we had you guys do like a 1 through 10, how were they ranked? It seemed a little weird at the time, but that data was really, really helpful for us because it helped us identify what are the top priorities that we need to move forward with. Depending on what level of funding exists, what you'll see is we've got to put that funding somewhere. So where does that go? It was your feedback that helped drive that. What we saw is what you see up on screen. There were 5 priorities that were clearly much higher than the rest. 1 and 2 were security and roofing. Those came in right there at the top. Every demographic, every group that we gathered data from said the same thing. They really wanted to see those 2 captured no matter what we did. Next came in at mechanical systems, a little bit below those 2, but not significantly below. That came in at a solid 3rd, really strong support. And especially was a high priority for the most passionate people, the people who really took an effort to come out to one of the engagement sessions. It's important to identify what matters to them, because if you're the most passionate, you're going to take action on something. And so this was a really important one for them. We wanted to make sure that it was included. Following that in this top 5 was electrical and plumbing and doors and windows. A bit of catch-all categories, but important. You'll see that kind of came in this grouping of the top 5, but at 4th and 5th. The remaining ones were all supported, just a little bit lower priority. So none of these were things we needed to avoid. Typically in this process with the school district, we'll see some items down here that actually were not supported, and we say, we gotta cut these, we can't do it. That wasn't the case here. They're all supported, just lower priority. You'll see them up on there on the screen, FFE, basic renovations, outdoors, pavement, sidewalks, and flooring. And so as money's available, certainly nothing wrong with addressing some of these priorities, but again, lower priority than those top 5 items. So to see here a full list, I know the screen's a little harder to read there, but that's the full list going from 1 to 10. It's important to note that we definitely wanted to make sure you guys all had this data. So we sent this out to you earlier, prior to tonight's meeting, and I think we have some of the surveys and the data that we're going to give you when we leave, right? Was that the plan, was to make sure we gave everyone the survey data?
We sent it.
Okay, you got it digitally, perfect, okay, making sure everyone had it. So you'll see, you can dive into some of this. If you have questions, Rich and I are here to kind of answer questions on the data. But you'll see, this is the list of the top 10, going from 1 to 10. But the important thing to note is there is a bit of a gap between 5 and 6. So even though it is a list of top 10, it's really top 5, a gap, and then the bottom 5 is the best way really to look at this. Now with the funding levels, what we saw was that all 4 funding levels were supported. Obviously the fact that each of the funding levels resulted in some level of a tax decrease, it isn't overly surprising to see that all of them were supported, but still it is notable because it isn't always what happens. Typically what happens is whatever's that highest funding level kind of comes in at a little bit iffy, right? The lowest funding level, of course, everyone's going to say that's great. I don't want to see too much of a tax impact. Or in this case, I'd like to see the maximum tax refund or tax reduction. Not that's not the right word. Tax decrease. There we go. But we didn't see that here. We saw that all of them were supported. That's important to note, and that goes into our thinking for the next level of this. Another thing to remember is that we did allow people that option to say, no, I want all that money, don't do anything. Only 12% of the public supported that option. So if you translate that into what that means 88% are interested in some level of moving forward. There was only 12% that said no. That's an important distinction for us. Oh, this young man. That's your point of me saying to stop. What did I do? When Tim says you stop, you stop. All right, so what does that mean? You'll see here that the public didn't show an overwhelming preference between the funding levels that were available to them. Usually we see there's a big gap. The public says, we really like this one, we really don't like that one. We didn't really see that. What we did see in the data is if you ranked it, what came in first, looking across all the different groups that we gathered data from, was that maximum number. Second was medium, third was low, and fourth was high. In honesty, they really all were essentially tied. There wasn't a big gap between them. To show you kind of how this looks, I want to show you there on the left is the rankings from the public in their intuitive levels, and And those on the right are those that are more engaged. You can see that those who are a little bit less engaged as their gut reaction, they chose medium as their number one funding level. That's important to note because medium is not low. Usually the public in the phone survey, they're going to say their favorite is the lowest number. They never say that anything below that lowest number is their favorite. So again, because we have the ability to compare what we see here versus what we see in other districts, I want to show you what is notable. And to the public, the fact that they want medium first and then maximum second is very notable. Low being all the way down to third tells us that the public really isn't that interested in that low of a number. They're willing to see it be a little bit higher. If you look on the engaged side, that would be those of you in this room, the committee that's very engaged. You see you chose maximum, then high, then medium, and low. Pretty clearly you're saying, we'd like the most we can get, but of course you understand that may not be feasible. You can see they're based on the record. So these go into kind of what informs our decisions moving forward. So if you look at what that low number is, that's at that 12.7 or 13 million. If you look at it again, as we translate this into next steps and options, you'll see that we move forward at the lowest level. Even though the public has said they'd be willing to go above that, the district has found that it has pushed forward the need to be as responsible as possible with the options we put forward. So we're picking that low number as the option one, giving people the ability to say they would like to see the lowest amount invested, giving people that option. Then as you move forward, choosing what option two is, you'll see it's right in the middle there between your medium funding level and your high funding level. There's 17.3 to 22, and so for that middle option, we've chosen there as option two is right in the middle of those numbers at 20 million. Finally, you see the high or the maximum funding level there is 27 million. We've translated that into option three at 27 million. So that's what's arrived at those three numbers as we look forward to condensing into three final options that we could be looking at. Again, staying within the framework, the public has said they're good with all of these numbers. You all said you're good with all of these numbers. So there wasn't any that we necessarily needed to cut off. Now it's simply moving forward and saying, what could you get at each of these numbers? So that's what we're going to look at moving forward as we're going to go through.
Can we stop there for a second?
Sure.
And just see if there's any questions about that polling data or any questions about how we arrived here?
Sure.
Before we go into the, so just opening it up.
So just in case you can hear with the microphone, anyone has any questions on what we just covered? How we got here to this point? Any questions on the data? If you had a chance to look through it, if you had some questions, anything you'd like to go over before we really dive into these options? Certainly, again, if you want to come up to us afterwards, we'll still be here. Or if you want to talk to us separately, we're happy to answer questions. But it looks like everyone kind of gets it, understands what we talked about. Yes, sir.
I get one question. So it was mentioned that there was 500 people, I think, participated in all the polls together. Was there a number that we were looking for to say we need at least this many people, or is that just how many people respond?
That was how many people responded, but yes, there is a number we want to see.
Okay.
So we want to see a bare minimum of 300 if at all possible. We'd like to get as close to, if not over 500, would be really a great number. So we got over that minimum number of 300 and then some, and so we're very happy with today. Great question.
What percentage of the district does that represent?
So in statistics, you don't really think of it that way, so I don't mean to not answer your question, but you're looking to achieve a certain level so that what's called the margin of error is lower. So it's not necessarily what percentage of the district does this represent, it's more what's the margin of error in the statistics. And so getting to that number keeps our margin of error below 5%. It gets even something, at our level, is actually below 4%, so we're really good, we're really happy with where that came in. But if you want to translate this into like what do we see in other polling in other areas, people will poll entire congressional districts, which is 700,000 people, or an entire state, and they'll be happy with 500 responses. So that gives you some idea of like, we're really happy with what we have here, this data is really solid. That'll tell you that like that we're good, this is really good data to work with.
I think a follow-up on that was really a great point you brought up at the board table, because I think one of our board members, I think it was you, Steve, asked specifically, okay, but of the people that you polled,
Was it representative of our community? So I don't know if you want to talk about the representation that you had seniors and women and men and married, no kids, that kind of thing, because I thought that was an important point.
Yeah. So I can nerd out on this stuff, so I tend to just go fast through it because I know no one else is excited about it as I am. So I'll jump into it, but stop me if I go too far. So in that survey, the reason why it's a scientific phone survey and why we use that as our baseline to say where do people feel right now is because that survey has done what's called weighting and modeling. And so we get a whole bunch of responses back from the public But then those responses are weighted and modeled by data experts to make sure that every single member of the community is accurately represented. And so what they do is they take those as subsets and they'll model it to say this community has X percentage of seniors, X percentage of males versus females, of younger people, of each of the different demographics that we looked at, and to make sure that no group is over or underrepresented. And so it's a lot of work they go into, it's way above my head, but it's necessary for this process because ultimately, what you want to make sure is that you didn't have, if we called on Tuesday night, for instance, and Tuesday night, just a lot of seniors happened to be home and they all answered the survey, well, we don't want to represent that as accurate data to you when it was mostly seniors and not everyone in the community. And so that data is weighted and modeled to make sure that what we're looking at is an accurate snapshot of this exact district. And so that becomes our baseline at the intuitive level. And then again, your feedback sort of becomes our baseline at the informed level, and now we can look at this as data to represent what we do moving forward. Any other thoughts or questions? I didn't lose you, getting too much in the weeds there? Good, okay. All right, so we're gonna go into this next step. Here's how this is gonna work. There are 3 options as you see on screen. I'm gonna introduce each of the options, talk you through what the numbers are, give some of the quick highlights, and then because I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, and we have the experts who know everything, I'm gonna pass it off to them. And so Maureen and Tim are gonna walk through, kind of give you some examples of what this means, what it's gonna cover, and what we're gonna ask you to do is with each of these options, please ask questions. We want you to get to the end of the 3 options, understanding the 3 options. Because then what we're gonna do is pause and have a discussion. What did you like about the options? What did you not like? How would you compare them? Do you have a favorite? Do you have a least favorite? So we're gonna do that after we've gotten through the 3 options. So first we'll go through one by one, give you as much information as we can, and have you ask questions. If you have no questions, that means you fully understand it, so that's not a bad thing. We wanna make sure you fully get what's in each option, what isn't in each option, and you're comfortable. That way as you start to discuss it, as you start to rank it, you feel confident you know what you're picking between. That make sense? All right, cool. So let's go into option 1. As you'll see, that's the option there, the 13 million. And as was explained a couple of times, you'll see those percentages, that's based on that full need, that $60 million need. Obviously, each of these aren't spending $60 million, so we're giving you an idea based on your feedback, how was that money allocated that was available? So in this case, with 13 million, the experts figured out based on the feedback you gave, where that money should go. Remember, security, roofing, mechanical systems, that was 1, 2, 3 in your feedback. And so you'll see there, 98%, 58%, 48%. A lot of that money has been put into those 3 categories that you said, listen, this is where we really want you to cover. And then as was available, you'll see a little bit is done in some of those other areas. But it doesn't address some of those items that are at the bottom. You see that we're not covering some of the items that are, of course, our needs. Let me give you some of the highlights here and what the tax impact is. So you'll see what this covers. Secure entrances at all buildings, there's several that still meet it. Fire alarm system updates at Arbor View. Roof replacements at the 3 that are most in need. Mechanical updates to HVAC systems, upgrade the telephone system, exterior window replacements at Arbor View, and a parking replacement for Arbor View in that south lot, which is the one that's most in need. Again, we talked about this is that $13 million option. What that means is that with this investment into the schools, average district home will still see a tax decrease of $139, again, on top of the decrease we talked about previously. So that's kind of the highlights, but now the people who have all the details will jump in and give us even more detail.
I just want to give a little context. So, obviously been looking at this for about 2 years now. So when we originally came up with the $12.7 million number, we had some different priorities than what the surveys came back. So we had prioritized parking lots a little higher than the community had. So what Tim and I did was basically spent an entire day in my office going through and saying, okay, the community feels that the secure entrances is a very important issue. Like, you walked into Arbor View here, it's not a necessarily perfectly secure entrance. The traffic doesn't flow into an office, it flows right into the hallway. So one of the projects would be getting that entrance secure here at Arbor View, as well as Briar Glen. It doesn't address Glencrest specifically, because Glencrest has the ability to cut off the other hallways so that access to the entire building is cut off. So that's really the majority of those projects. The only other thing, the other reason it's 98% is there's a small project at the district office, the elevator, that's a security issue, and that one's not addressed in this. But we literally went through that list, and Tim, again, has worked here for 28 years, so he definitely has a very specific priority list, but we went through and said, okay, maybe that boiler, Tim could continue to patch that boiler for another couple of years. So that's kind of the conversation that we had, just to give you some context. Some of the things that it doesn't address, again, boiler replacements, which again, design are important, but not as important to the community. Parking lot replacements, the Arbor View lot definitely needs to be replaced. You guys walked in here and you saw the potholes that are the size of a small child. So that's definitely on the list, quite frankly. So there's some other things that we felt we should take off the list just for safety issues, like that parking lot. Then we have obviously the fire alarm system and the telephone system. I think we talked in detail about the phone system before. It's outdated and we cannot even get parts for it anymore, so that has to stay on the list, really. Some of the other things that it doesn't address are the generators, the kitchen renovations that we spoke of last time, doors, hardware, and frames replacement for interior and exterior doors and windows.
So what questions can we answer on what this covers, what it doesn't cover? Again, we'll walk through each of the options separately, but for this one, what can we answer to make sure you fully understand it? Yes, sir.
This might have been, I can't remember if you addressed the first time, but with the cost of labor and materials skyrocketing as they have been,
With the cost of labor and materials going up so much they have been, I think that 48% is off of the estimated current cost of that project. Is that's what it cost a year ago, and 48 is now 35%.
Good question.
Yeah, I'm gonna look to Paul Passetti, who is one of our architects, but I believe we have an 8% inflation factor in each year. So we estimate that if we can get part of this done in the summer of 2023, we're a little too late to do it in 2022, that there would be an 8% increase, and that's built into these numbers already. And then we know that a portion we would be able to get some done in 23 and then some done in 24, so then there's another 8% factor built in. But you bring up a great point. These are our estimates. That doesn't mean that's where the bids are gonna come in, so there might be some little adjustment here and there to some of these projects for that reason.
if we overshoot, where do we take the remaining funds from? Is that some operational budget for the district, or how is it, if it comes in $1 million more than we think, where's that money?
That's a great question as well. That's something that the board will have to decide when the bids come in.
Or some projects might have to be reduced or.
You can reduce the scope of some projects. You start pulling things apart. I'm by no means a construction person. However, I've renovated my entire house, so I do know when you pull windows and things out, different things come up that are unexpected 95% of the time, right? So there is some push built into some of those numbers as well.
One of the important things, the question was what happens if something comes in over, where do you find those funds, just in case anyone didn't hear, or for those who are watching the video. One thing the reason that we gather data the way we do in phase 2 is so the district has those rankings moving forward. And so they've got that data. And so something comes in where they have less money than what they thought, they know what your priorities are. They can pull it from the 5th priority instead of having to pull it from the 2nd priority. If there is more money, which is of course always a wonderful situation, then they know let's put it into priority 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe not 8 or 9. That's why we did that the way we did it, is that data is great for the district and the board moving forward. So as they're evaluating, because remember, 60 million is the larger need. So we're not getting all of that done. So as they evaluate in future years, where are we investing, they know what you as a community have set are your priorities. So that ranking is going to be really favorable and helpful as the district moves forward for things just like what you asked.
And I'm gonna have Paul just kind of elaborate on your question.
Yeah, and as you said, you never know, and with the supply chain and things like that, hopefully it's gonna start calming down a little bit, maybe some of the numbers will start coming back down, but we do have, as Maureen said, we do have, year-to-year inflation built in, and then obviously there's also contingencies. So we hold probably a 10% contingency in those numbers as well. But again, when the scope comes in, we'll schedule it. Some of the things will be alternates so that we can get a project. We'll rank that, and depending on what the money comes in, then we'll address it.
Contingency is a better word than push.
What other questions can we answer? About the whole thing in general, or specifically here to option 1? You feel like you get it? You understand kind of what we're looking at here for option 1? All right, we're good? Excellent, that's a good sign. All right, let's go into option 2, and let's look at that. So here in option 2, we'll see, I'm going to go sheet on the second slide, just show you that $20 million number as a reminder. So we've got a little bit more here. The security gets bumped up from 98 to 100%. There's a little bit more there in roofing. You'll see a good amount more there in mechanical systems. And then we're able to do a little bit more towards electrical and plumbing, some towards doors and windows. You'll see there's some of those others that's smaller, but now with a little bit more to work with, your experts are able to say, you know what, this is really, really high priority. We can fit it in. Let's get this in. So you get a little bit more of that ability here here in option 2. You'll see there's some items that are not included in this, and we'll talk about that in a second. Some of the highlights, we talked about before, secure entrances, fire alarm, roof, mechanical updates. This also includes boiler replacements, so that's the major change there. Also, upgraded lighting is another significant addition to option 2. We talked about the windows, and I believe this is now more window replacements than the last one. The last one was just option 1 was just one school. Now we have more. This also includes some of that, the wheelchair lift, locker, cafeteria, table replacements. These we called that FFB category we couldn't touch before, but now we do. So that's all included in here. Again, that estimated cost is that $20 million number. What that means for taxes, for the average taxpayer, is a $51 decrease. That's what that option 2 is. Now I'll pass it to Maureen to go into it more in depth.
Yeah, I think the biggest change here is addressing the HVAC systems at Briarland, which Tim has already discussed with you guys, is that that's our highest cost building, basically. So a lot of these will, decrease the cost of running the building. It doesn't make sense to change the HVAC systems without addressing the ceilings and the lights. So you do those things at the same time. You're going to tear apart the roof anyway, the ceiling, so you would do those things at the same time. So that's really what's included here. Again, parking lots has been pulled all the way to the end here, the least priority issue. Kitchen renovations for the lunch program won't get done, and then we'll also not be doing some other interior and exterior doors and frames.
All right, so here to option 2. The questions can be answered. What is covered? What is it? I'll try to bounce between the slides just so again you can reference it, but of course you've got the printed version in front of you. Questions? At this portion, no questions is a good thing, means you're getting it, right? We're gonna have a discussion later and everyone's gonna have to speak then. Kevin, go ahead.
I got more of a general question. Have you gotten quotes on, maybe the top couple things, right? Let's say roofing, right? Like, have you guys already gotten quotes on that, or would you wait until after the bond passes before you go get those?
I'm going to defer that question to Paul.
Or Dr. Tim. At least we're in a gym, so it feels a little
Right,
better.
so the roofing numbers are based off of what we're seeing in the industry. They're not hard bids. We won't do that until we have the money in hand. I don't think the district can go forward and design all that and get the quotes without having the money in hand, so, unless I'm wrong on that, but.
No, you're 100% right. We cannot go out to bid until we have the funds available to do so.
Right, so, yeah, so ours is, it's a budget, but we do a lot of roofs and we do a lot of this type of work, so it's, again, it's based on kind of our current, where we see numbers coming in, so.
With the type of the roof, as well as the
So,
square
yeah, the
footage.
type of the roof and the system, and we know, a certain amount of tear off and all that, so.
We're gonna save Dr. Tim to run.
The reason I asked is, going back to the gentleman's question, inflation is one thing, but product and distribution issues have increased the cost on almost everything, right? So is there not a reason where maybe you would do $5 or $10 million now to handle the most crucial things, and then maybe do another 10 a couple of years down the road when prices come down?
It's not an option that we've discussed. The way that the money comes in, recall that we get authority to issue the bonds. We issue the bonds sometime in the fall, and we can choose to issue bonds in more than one issue. If we did that, we could do what you're suggesting. We haven't talked in that kind of detail yet.
We
It's-
have our financial expert here, so can you answer, just so we can talk about it, how long the district has to issue bonds and then spend that money, based on?
So when the school district passes the building bond referendum, it must issue all the bonds within 5 years. As bonds are sold, the district for the IRS has to have a reasonable expectation to spend at least 85% within 3 years after those bond proceeds are received. So the district has to spend those monies in due diligence and project.
So the reason I wanted to make sure I pointed that out is there will be that flexibility. Typically with inflationary pressures, you're not gonna wanna wait, because even though if the product cost comes down, inflation is gonna overrun that, and you're gonna still end up spending more money. But the district will have that flexibility. So what I would simply point to is that the district has been so responsible with the way it has spent funds. I'm sure they'll look at those options. If there is a cheaper option, they're absolutely gonna choose them, and that's their track record. So that's what I would point to.
We also need to be cognizant of the interest rate environment. So that's clearly increasing. We expect it to continue to increase. We want to be able to get the most for our money, right? So we're kind of on both ends of the spectrum here. We have to worry about what we're paying as well as what we're paying on the interest side.
Yeah, great question, and I think it kind of lends itself to why you have people like Tammy and others involved, because they're gonna find where that sweet spot is, where you get the most bang for your buck, which is obviously the heart of your question.
Is interest locked in on those bonds?
Is interest locked in those bonds was the question?
Yeah. There's usually a callable option, which is how we refinanced the two options, the two series that we already had open. There's usually a call.
What other questions?
One more on that, just because interest rates are so favorable.
Sure. I think someone just mentioned we are in a rising interest rate environment, which is true. But from an historical perspective, and I'm looking back 35, 40 years, we are still near historically low interest rates. So it's something else to keep in mind.
So definitely a little bit of dance there. So what you, sounds like you want to issue as soon as possible. Now that starts to click the ticking clock if you have 3 years. So there's certainly things to keep in mind.
Which I'm not saying $27 million isn't a lot of construction, but it's definitely doable in 2 summers.
Yeah, and we've seen much more than that done in 1 or 2 or 3 summers, so definitely. Other questions? This is good. These have been great, insightful questions. All right, we're going to go into option 3. We'll talk through that, and then as I said, we're going to have a discussion, and I'm going to be looking around anyone who hasn't spoken. We want to get your thoughts during that discussion portion. But first, make sure we understand what we're talking about. So here, option 3, as a reminder, that's that 27 million number. And here you can see higher numbers under security and roofing is about the same, obviously, with mechanical systems a little higher. Electrical, plumbing, doors and windows also a bit higher. Really the big change here is pavements and sidewalks takes a big bump. Some of those other categories take minor bumps up. What does that mean? That means that of the highlights, some of these we talked about already. Secure entrances, fire alarm system, roof replacements, mechanical, HVAC and boilers, lighting, but now we're including emergency generators. We talked about the telephone system. Now we're talking about interior and exterior door replacements. That's a significant add here. We're also talking about kitchen renovations and those parking lots, all parking lots replaced. So there are several significant additions here, but of course, we'll learn a little bit more about them.
Parking lots. Yeah, they're an issue. You may not be aware, we have a generator currently in this building. We also have a portable generator that, should the electricity go out, can keep the buildings. But we only have one portable generator right now, so we'd like to get another one. And again, Briar Glen, I feel like we pick on Briar Glen a lot. Briar Glen has an electrical issue with Commonwealth Edison, so sometimes the electricity goes out there more frequently than everywhere else. So we'd like to get a dedicated generator for that building as well. And as the person who runs the food service program, I would love to have the kitchens renovated so that we can do some cooking in those kitchens and actually serve food that's just been cooked there instead of plated in an outdoor facility.
So you'll see in this option, we're covering a lot of those high priority immediate needs. But as a reminder, again, we're talking about 27 of the 60, the full 60 million. That's why you see those percentages there. Much of it is covering that full number. But we're making some good progress. And as you see, the district has really prioritized where the public or you all have said you really want to see those improvements. There's a few things that the district has said, knowing these buildings and knowing what the needs are, we also really, really need to get this done. And this really brings all that together. Questions about option 3? Yes, sir.
How material are cost saves based on the efficiency of the buildings or cooking food here instead of plating and stuff like that? Are cost saves from these different things baked into it, or is it a material number?
It's definitely less expensive to cook the food here than it is to have it pre-plated and offered to the kiddos. I'm going to let Tim comment on your other comment of cost savings if we were to do all of the upgrading work at Briar Glen for energy efficiency.
Basically, Briar Glen, I stated it before, per square foot cost me just as much to run as Glencrest. The reason for this is the type of system that's in there. And I don't know what your HVAC background is, but there's multi-zone equipment in there. And the long and short of it is I bring in a lot of outside air and I reheat that outside air. To a certain extent, that's good, obviously, for fresh air. But there's better ways to go about this that makes the system more energy efficient, like fan-powered VAV is what I would suggest. And there's other things too. The main air handling system at night I could turn off, And the individual room boxes would be able to support heating overnight by themselves without running a large air handling systems. And then in the morning, obviously, they kick on for the cooling aspect. So you can see that what I'm running now compared to what I would be running with fan-powered VAV, there's a substantial difference in cost. We have fan-powered VAV at Westfield right now, and that is in the library section of the building, that part. And we actually try to choose to use that for summer schools and things because it is cost effective to run. Did I answer your question?
I think part of the question was how much of the savings that we might see is in these numbers, or is it not included? Is this gonna be a bonus that we're gonna see?
Are we saving $500,000 a year on various things? That's
On energy?
Just it, I know it's a kind of guess or swag, but yeah, on energy or food or any of these improvements, right? Are you gonna see 500 more in the operational budget a year or something like that? Any?
You know, I can't give you an honest answer on how much we'll save going with man-powered VAV over the multi-zone equipment, because I have no data to back it up.
Yeah.
But due to design, if you will be saving money for sure.
I think you're also talking about with replacing the lighting. I mean, there's a lot of things in here. The little
Yeah, there's LEDs.
Yeah, long-term savings to do.
But I mean, in general, you know, the amount of money that you save because you don't have to patch the roofs as often as you have to patch. The energy efficiency in the windows, the mechanical systems and all that. Obviously, you're gonna see savings in your energy costs and your general everyday maintenance costs that you wouldn't have to put outlay by being able to upgrade these. You'll see cost reduction in other areas in your general operating.
Most definitely.
Okay.
I think the answer is, it sounds like, yes, definitely savings. It's hard to give you an exact number, but definitely savings. What else? Any other questions about option 3 in specific or the process in general? Everyone kind of feel like we understand what the 3 options are, so now we can talk about it. Everyone good? If you have notes. All right, so let's do that. We're gonna go in. We're not gonna have you guys rank them on paper yet. I want to talk it through. We're gonna go in and talk about what are your preferences, what do you like about the different options, what do you want to see included, so you want to go with an option that for sure covers blank. What are those things that are important to you? And we'd love to hear from every single person here. So, just in general, what are your thoughts? I might start to nudge us in a certain direction to get more, but anyone have any immediate thoughts they want to share? Yes, we got a microphone comments in a second.
So first of all, a question about the yearly tax decrease. I think it means it's beyond the 239 that we're saving from, right, okay.
Yes, this is
So
on-
I'm getting the 239, and honestly, I'm fine with that, I'm fine with $4, I just want to make sure I
Yes.
understand.
Yeah, so just to make sure we make it clear for you guys.
Right, I'm
So
getting that
if
this
the
way.
original 239 isn't happening, this
Yeah.
is all on top of that. So
Okay,
it
good.
would be 243, or I can do that math that fast.
That's okay,
Yeah.
that's okay. So personally, I want to see the most we can get, because like we said before, there are 50-plus-year-old buildings. If we don't fix things now, it's just going to get worse. So as long as you're saving me the 239, I like option 3 or more. So if you ask for an opinion about
I love it. No.
I want as much as we can get.
That's a great opinion, we appreciate it. We're taking notes, so it's great. Who else has thoughts?
I think you already answered this just in terms of the experts that know the buildings kind of chiming in on this, but if things like the doors and windows were ranked so high, and then the lots, for example, were ranked at 9, is it just discretion that's kind of driving the lots, for example, getting $4 and higher percentages than the doors and windows, even though the ranking is higher for those items?
I mean, Julie brought up a great point, because we are patching those lots, so the maintenance on those lots has become more than we expect, I guess. So, yeah, there is a little bit of discretion that when we got up to that $27 million number, we had a conversation about what would be more important for that. I mean, sure, if we had 60 million, which we're not talking about, we could get everything done on that list, but we know that the board had a goal of not raising taxes again.
And I think what's important to note is if you look back to options 1 and options 2, you'll see it was just the one most important, highest priority lot that got covered. It's simply an option 3, where there is a little bit more room, and so the district, knowing what the needs are, and having a little bit more knowledge than all the rest of us, we're like, hey, let's rank this. We're saying, you know what, we're really doing well there in the top 3. We're putting a good amount towards the 4th and 5th. With our discretion, this is going to save taxpayers a good amount of money. Let's also do this as well.
Maybe, I don't know if this was part of the question, but you mentioned the percentages, but I think just maybe to help explain it in case that was part of the question, the percentages are based off of that specific line item total amount that you had identified, right? So the pavement and sidewalks is a different dollar amount than like mechanical. There's still a lot more money total going towards the higher, the higher ranked ones. Just that a lower amount of money would be able to move it from 13 to 72 between the options 2 and option 3. I just want to make sure that was
That's a solid point, yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah, to point out that is, out of that category, 100% of the security projects are getting completed. That doesn't mean that that's $5 million. We all know it's 1.4 million. And the parking lots, I believe the total on parking lots may be right about 2.5 to 3. So when we talk 72% of that, we elected not to do the district office parking lot because we don't feel it's important. And because a portion of that is owned by the theater building next door. So we said, we're not gonna do that part. So there's a lot of conversation that goes into exactly how we came up with those priorities. And also, obviously, incorporated all of the community input as well.
Great. Who else has thoughts? You have a favorite? Certain projects you're gonna make sure it's done no matter what? You wanna talk about the tax impact? Everyone's gotta say something before we leave, so. Okay, you guys, at some point, Vaughn told you to give a thought. There we go, Jay's going.
I feel like it's like house hunters, number 1 has all this, which goes on to 3. Number 1, I'm crossing off my list, just because it's it's really just a mandate. I mean, if we're talking about solutions, and option 1 is the way you want to go, I feel like we're really not looking at the big picture. I mean, there's so many things that aren't covered in that option that we really do need. And I think option 3, even though it doesn't cover, it's 60 million is what we need, but we can't spend that. I mean, we just absolutely can't. Option 3 is the way to go because it just gets everything that we can. We get the most bang for our buck. So,
Appreciate it.
go to Craftsman, the entertainment area.
When I was back in high school, my basketball coach was this big, hulking, scary guy. And he'd walk in the room and he'd say, I need a volunteer. You'll do, and you'll do. We never actually got to volunteer. We never volunteered. So that's how we're going to do the feedback part at a certain point. Who else has thoughts? Talk about any aspect of this. Is there a project you really want to make sure, hey guys, don't forget, do this? Talk about tax impact. You'll have an option you like or don't like. You don't want to just call people and screw.
Whatever option is chosen would be the only bond that's allowed.
So the question, I can show you that, thanks. So the question was, would that be, whatever option is chosen, will that be the only bond that is active at that time?
It will.
So I guess my question is, whether you get option 1, 2, or 3, I guess what would the feedback be to the community? Because it's a 5-year bond, right? So depending on option 1 through 3, they get.
No, it's not a 5-year bond.
It's not a 5-year bond. We have discussed the repayment schedule, but historically, District 89 has repaid their bonds between 10 and 15 years.
Okay. So I guess the question is, whatever gets approved, what is going to be the impact to the community as far as the next round of bond funding, right? So let's say you get option 2. It keeps getting mentioned that there's 60 million to do, right? So if you guys do option 2, at what point is the community going to be asked for more bonds? I guess is what I'm getting at.
I don't have an answer for that.
Yes, Dr. Chambers.
We have to discuss that.
I have 2 board members here who have been very committed to fiscal conservativeness, and bonds have typically been talked about when they are up. And so, to be quite honest, I would imagine to say the next time you're talking about bonds, it's either because the community went to the board and said they really wanted something, Likely, none of us will be here the next time you talk about bonds, because the payment schedule is such that it's probably 15 years out, and you talk about bonds at a time, at least in this district, historically, you want to talk about bonds at a time when you don't have to do a tax rate increase.
So, I think.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm just, if we have neighbors that ask about it, I'm just wondering, if you get option 1, 2, or 3, is the community going to be asked for more money in the near future as opposed to waiting until those bonds expire?
You're bringing up a great point. This isn't the way we run the operating rate referendum. The operating rate referendum, we said we hope that this will last for 10 years. This isn't the same, and here's why, because enrollment could blow up and we could need an addition tomorrow. Don't anticipate that happening because we run enrollment projections based on live births, so we do have that data. But again, historically, the way the District 89 has issued debt is right at 25 million, and has paid it off between 10 and 15 years. So if it's 10 or 12 years from now, you guys are having this conversation again, I would anticipate that would be the soonest.
To answer your question though, Kevin, there is thought that needs to be had with
What projects get done? And if you borrow the minimum and do the minimum projects, what does that look like 15 years out? And what will that cost? And could it result in a tax increase because we need to bond additional funds to address what we couldn't address now?
And there's certainly I'll get you there. There's a sustainability issue here that a lot of districts talk about, so I just want to point it out, that if the district is so committed to making sure that the next time we talk about this, it's again not a tax increase, well, then whatever you choose this time, that's going to be your constraining number that next time. So the challenge is if you choose the lowest number, how much of that, of the 60 million that doesn't get done, grows now, and there'll be new needs that come up. That's just your current needs. So there may be then the need, if you choose, let's say, option 1, now you've got that covers 13 of the 60. That 60 is going to grow. So that probably means, yes, the district may have to, I'm only speaking just for myself, may have to say in 5 years, listen, we're in a struggle, we're in a tough spot, we got to talk about something. So, you can't really predict the future, but what you choose today will have an impact on the future. And,
To kind of piggyback off of what he said, so originally we talked about that it would take 20 years if we did nothing right now to cover everything. So let's say we go with option 3. We're covering almost 50% of it. Do we have money in the budget over the time that the bond, we still have the bond, we have the bonds, prior to the bonds being up for renewal, that out of the operating budget, we continue to tackle these projects year after year. And maybe when the bonds are up for renewal, the entire list has already been taken care of, and, in that time, we can decide what we need to do then.
So, I'm just gonna say at the February 28th meeting, if anybody wants to come, I'm updating my financial projections. And the board had a goal when we passed the operating rate referendum to increase our fund balance for unexpected contingencies, just like we just dealt with COVID. So I can do my best. I don't have a crystal ball. I deal with what assumptions I can make at the time that I do my projections. But if we have room in the budget to put some money aside, and I think, Kevin, you mentioned this last time as well, to put some money aside into like a capital projects fund, we can absolutely do that. I will let you know also that Tim has a budget each year to address things that can come up. Like one year, I remember we had a manhole cover just collapse into the sewer. So that was $10,000 that we had to just come up with. So he does have a budget like that to cover things, and we'll continue to give him that as well. But if we have room in the projections to do that, it's something that the board can speak of.
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously, new needs will come up. So, right, these are the addressing the needs that have been identified today. You don't know what needs will come up tomorrow, but the jump start you make will certainly have an impact when you're talking about future budgets down the line.
I'm all for option 3, yeah, but looking at this list, this is all, I would say, not necessarily the cute stuff, right? This is doors, it's not the cute stuff, right? Honestly, it's Tim's cute stuff, right? This is cute stuff to Tim. This is not cute stuff to my friend Heba back here. So, I mean, if you see that is there ever going to be a time when there's some of the other stuff that's on here that was identified that would make more of an impact perhaps for the kids, for the students. Like upgrades to the lot, you know, furniture upgrades. We talked about some of the furniture that didn't get as high of a ranking. You know, if you find that, right, Tim, it's not the cute stuff to you. So if there's, you know, an opportunity that you find that you've got, is there that opportunity that perhaps down the line in a year or two that could be funded? That there may be that, I'm just asking for.
I would anticipate that we would chip away at some of those other things on a yearly basis, quite honestly, in Tim's operating budget. But we talked about furniture a couple times, and we did replace all the furniture 5 years ago in all of the elementary schools, so just so everybody knows.
The furniture we're talking about here is like, it's basketball goals and tables and, you know, some of the more basic stuff. But the question is a valid one, which is a lot of school districts, you said cute stuff, I think we talk about as flashy, right? This is definitely not the flashy stuff. But it sounds like the district has made investments over the years to make sure that we're covering those educational needs. There's a reason why this is a high-performing district. So it sounds like that will continue to be an investment.
And to your point, Julie, as well, that if we don't have to spend as much money maintaining the other assets, then that frees up more money to chip away at some of those things.
It's just one of the things that stands out to me here is comparing like 2 and 3. That with 3, so 7 million more, you basically end up doing a comparison. Your main difference is your it's like extra generators, right? And then a little bit of mechanical and electrical and roofing, not a lot, but the bulk is really the doors and windows.
Yes.
And the pavement and sidewalks, which at the first meeting, it seemed like those came up a lot. And to me, you know, I'd say the doors and windows are much more important to me, for security reasons, for the safety reasons. We talked a little bit about it at the first meeting. I don't know how much is covered in the lower amount, but you know, some of the windows don't open all the way and stuff. You know, so there's different things that come to mind when I think of doors and windows. And with option 2, you get no doors, like at all. So if we're talking about, you know, do we end up, it's just listed as like windows on the list. So unless I'm missing something. But my concern is that like if we wait 10, 15 years, so we have to chip away, you know, as part of that, maybe a big part of that 7 million out of the operational budget to replace those types of things that need to be done.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So.
Great observation. Question in the corner.
Probably the last one, sorry. Alright, so in my mind, tell me if this is semi-accurate. If the 8% inflation projections are wrong, or the bids come in high, option 3 becomes option 2.5. If they're right, then this fiscally responsible district has money to add to some of the other priorities, or they'll manage money right. Is that fair to say?
Yes, fair to say.
So then my other question, this may be a little off, but I don't know who's the teacher, what their opinions have. Is there anything that's and it's not a lot of fun stuff, but is there anything that is higher priority teachers that we would think would make an impact on their experience or retention or whatever? Like, I don't drive over the pothole every day, they do, those kind of things?
Yeah, well, Ricky and Kiva are teachers on this, and we had a district-wide meeting, and we received teacher feedback on the surveys as well, and that feedback really
closely aligned to the feedback from the community as well. But I would love it if Kiva or Ricky would want to answer that question, or just even provide your own insight about what would be important to you.
Not to put you terribly on the spot. And Kiva threw it to you, Ricky, so.
I put you on the spot.
I don't mind. I work at the infamous Briar Glen. I've been involved there. My children went through there, so I've seen the school since it was 23 years old. It was the only school that was air conditioned. We were proud of it, and now there are problems. I would love to see the windows, because to me, the energy costs would be affected if our windows sealed. My window does not seal properly. I don't know, are we talking just exterior doors? Because there's a lot of rust where mice can get in, where there's holes, where it's
degraded. The parking lot is dangerous, there's no question about it at our building. And, I mean, that's just a liability that Maureen has to deal with, and the people who fall. But I do agree with the comment about if we're gonna spend this money, how do the children see, you know, because it's very, and people just walking into our buildings. The kitchen would make a huge difference, because the kids would not only have hot lunches, but I'm hoping that for all the different functions that we'll once again have, our PTCs will be able to prepare food, and that would impact everybody in the building.
That's a great point.
Parents and families, so. But I agree with the list, and I'm also a taxpayer in the district, and I absolutely will vote for option 3.
With the assist.
And listening to the basketball kiddos at that door, so it's just making a point, right?
I was just gonna say the security. Like, I want the kids to feel safe here. I want to feel safe here. I mean, I jump every time the basketball hit the door. I'm like, who is it? Where are they coming from? And I know that this isn't the flashy stuff, and I appreciate the way the information was organized this time around. I think that, from before, it was a little overwhelming seeing all the different options and having to prioritize it. It was kind of like, okay, so what, is the car gonna fall apart if I don't pick this one? Like, what's gonna happen if I wait on that option? So I appreciated, this seems a little bit more like conducive, and I can understand it better. And I was happy to see that all of the security made every single one, so. And I would also vote for option number 3, but I'm a winner either way, so.
I mean, I think the key is, so 2 things to that. One, I know last meeting was tough, but it was what allowed us to do this. So thank you for enduring it. You gave us what we needed. Here's one thing I'd say is that some of our other districts, that you wouldn't have seen security in every one. They would have had this secret special meeting that said, well, we really want the maximum, so what if we plug the things they really, really want in that third option to nudge them toward that? What you see is option 1 is self-contained, option 2 is self-contained, option 3 is self-contained. If you choose that option, the district has said, here's how we're gonna make the most of that money. Not every district would do that. They try to put a little sweeteners into option 3, try to nudge you towards that. So you're getting 3 real options here to consider. And I'll just tell you that probably half of our clients wouldn't have done that. So you are getting real options here to consider. And that's why you see security in every single one. That's why you see roofing in every single one, mechanical systems in every single one. Any other feedback? Most of you have jumped in. By the way, I'm the boy who cried wolf. I'm actually not going to call on you. But I figured with the threat, maybe we would get you to speak up if you haven't already. Anyone else want to have their thoughts heard? You want to give your preference on the issues or on the options? Any final questions? All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to pass out the feedback form. This one's a lot more simple. We're going to ask you to give feedback on these 3 options. I think we have, this is the one we're using. So you'll see up there, you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just like last time, we need you to use all 4, please. No ties, no letters. It's simply 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to switch screen just for a second because I want to emphasize 1 is the highest. Give us your rankings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's the comment section at the bottom. If you have any comments, any additional thoughts, please make sure you share it there. We can capture all that. The district reads it, the board reads that. So please, again, rank it 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's a lot more simple to do. 1 is the highest, and you need to use all 4 numbers, otherwise our data system doesn't work. Just as you guys saw with your feedback from option 2, it's really going to drive what the decision will be.
Everyone get one?
Everyone get one? Anyone need a form? Everyone get it? Anyone need a pen or pencil or anything? Looks like we've got everyone covered. Give it another minute, just for those who want to write comments. See some people are still working, which is great. And then we'll talk about next steps once we're finished here.
How do you know he doesn't have like Hello Kitty stuff in his car?
do you know he doesn't have Hello Kitty in his car, you know?
I meant tables, I meant, you know, like, the bathroom stall, it's got lights on them.
Okay,
It would be like a reading or a video.
Yeah, I have a random answer.
All right, looks like everybody's done. If you're still working, that's okay. If you're still changing, that's okay. You can finish it up. We won't steal it from you until you're ready. But let's talk about next steps, and we'll close this up so we can get people home. So what's coming up next is we will be taking another phone survey, very similar to what the last one was, but of course this time much shorter, much easier to respond. So we're going to be taking that phone survey. You'll be hearing about that. As you hear from people, if they're getting calls, please encourage them to take that survey. We do really want as much feedback from the public as possible. So but you can help us with that. We'll of course be letting the public know as well. We really want them to give us feedback.
And at some point, if you did not get a phone call and you have a neighbor who wants to participate in it, the number will be posted on the district's website. So you could call in and take the survey, or you could do it electronically as well.
Yeah, so there will be options, just in case we didn't hear that. There'll be a phone number posted by the district, so if you don't get called, you can call in to give your feedback. And you also can give your feedback online. So we're giving, again, as many options as possible for people to get back to us, tell us how they feel. You'll see there are several board meetings listed to go through this. So we'll be reporting on all the data we gather during this phase, including the data we got from you tonight at that February 28th board meeting. If we do, if the district does decide to move forward with a referendum, that vote would occur on Monday, March 21st, that board meeting. So those are the ones to note in your calendars. Our next meeting as a group will be on Monday, March 7th. The location is to be determined, but it'll be at 6 o'clock, so please make sure that's on your schedules. That's going to be an important meeting because there we'll be able to tell you all the data we got back, what the feedback from the board was based on that data, and what looks like will be the final plan, kind of how that's going to look. So we hope to have it here, not here, but wherever possibly here that meeting is, and we'll go into all those details of what that final plan is. All right, so I'll pass it back if you want to close this out.
I just want to say thank you for coming out. I know it's winter, I know it's cold, I know there's a million other things you could be doing tonight, but none of this is top secret, and your role is to go back to your neighbors in your community and talk about this and encourage people to go to the District 89 website. All of this is posted. These meetings are videotaped. The community engagement meetings were videotaped. All the feedback is there. It is out there and open for anyone to read and give feedback to. So please spread that word for us as well, okay? Have a great night.